Hello, everybody. My name is Jacek, and I'm excited to be your webinar host today alongside Lee. Please virtually raise your hand if you can see and hear me. Okay, good. First of all, thank you for joining today's webinar about how to improve business processes across the entire organization. As of now, we have almost 40 attendees. Some are still missing. So let's wait one more minute to give a chance for those struggling to join, and we will start off. Please take this opportunity to grab a drink or snack and get comfortable. So I think we can start. Good morning again to all attendees. I welcome you warmly. My name is Jacek, and together with Lee Bonham, we are your webinar host today. Our webinar will be divided in 3 parts. Introduction and demo, each 20 minutes long, plus, let's say, 15 minutes for Q&A session with you. The main body provided by Lee will show us how process mining may massively impact the entire business, even yours. If you have any questions, please send a message on the chat and we will be more than happy to answer them, but in the last part of our webinar. The handouts, you don't have to take notes because in the following days, the presentation will be sent to all of you that have left their email addresses during registration. Maybe first slide about today hosts. If you take a look at the slide, you will see 2 nice gentlemen who not only share an interest in process mining, but also have something else in common. Guess what? My name is Jacek Dudkiewicz, and I'm a managing director at Rhenus Office Systems in Poland, where our special Rhenus automation unit is located. Rhenus is an international brand well known for its wide portfolio in logistics services, but not only for this. For example, we operate in the records and information management industry. At Rhenus, I'm in charge of innovation and developing new services. For this reason, we created an outstanding partner ecosystem, and exactly IBM, presented today by Lee Bonham, with the Cloud Pack for business automation is a very important element in this ecosystem. We aim to be one-stop solution provider, offering intelligent automation product, solution, and advisory services. So as a result, we help our customer increase the decision-making capabilities. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today's webinar, Lee Bonham from IBM. Lee is highly regarded expert in process analysis, possessing a vast amount of expertise gained from working on approximately 20 projects now across various industries in Europe. And Lee's reputation precedes him as a true star in the field of process mining. And I couldn't think of anyone better suited to share their insight with us today. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Lee Bonham. Lee, would you like just to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. And how do I follow that intro? And by the way, I did love the fact that we do have these 2 sunglass pictures. I think it's really good. Yeah, hi, my name's Lee. I've been at IBM for about 1.5 years, which probably is quite a short time compared to many. I actually came from the Minevinio acquisition, which is the process mining component that IBM purchased. And I think we met us in Poland this year, had dinner, and I think there's some great synergies between us and Rhenus. So thanks very much for the introduction, and thanks for welcoming me to the WebEx.
Yes, thank you, Lee. And now, very important question. Am I sure that it is worth to invest 1 hour in this webinar? Lee, to ensure that everyone benefits from our presentation, I would like to address a concern that some potential attendees may have. And the question is, would this webinar be suitable for someone with limited knowledge about process mining, but interested in exploring the possibility of enhancing business efficiency?
Absolutely. I mean, what we're going to show today is we're going to talk about why process mining and where it is at that tip of the spear, in effect, in terms of engaging business, engaging clients. And we're going to show you how it works, right? So we're actually going to have a little drop into the platform so you can see how from very, very simple data, you can analyze things that you've probably never been able to analyze before. So definitely suited, I think, all those that don't know process mining all the way up to have seen some before. Interesting mix I'm seeing there coming up on the poll.
You can start just sharing your screen.
Okay, let's do that. Can you see my screen? I'm hoping.
Yes.
So again, thanks very much for the introduction. Let's sort of move into a very, very important, I guess it was answering that point. I'm assuming everyone knows who this man is, right? This is probably a very, very poignant person, I think, in history. It's, well, as we know, jokingly, Mr. Albert Onestone. And I think this is a fundamental question. One of the things that I've certainly seen in programs across Europe is, how many times have you walked into a meeting and instantly somebody will say, I have a solution, and yet they don't even know what the problem is yet? And I think this is the fundamental question, is if you have a very, very finite amount of time to fix something in your organization, then actually the phrase here with Albert is coined around, you'd rather spend most of that time understanding what the problem is, because actually if you understand that problem, fixing it becomes a lot easier. So actually, I think this is a really, really good example of showing what the bias is between time. It's heavily weighted on that analysis. So, and again, the whole point around process mining, and that's the subject that we're going to talk about today, is, you know, and again, you can't really sort of say it any better than that, which is you cannot improve what you don't know. You can't change what you don't know. And what we're going to do today is we're going to cover the fundamental elements of how that analysis is going to work. It's a different way of thinking. And then we'll drop into the platform so you can see exactly how that then functions. So let's start with the concept of change, right? We know we need to change, and you know there are many discussions around what that change might be, but ultimately it's either to stay competitive or it's to make sure we improve products and services to our customers, etc. But there's three main questions, I think, that burn and challenge that ability to change. Where do you begin? You know, when you're starting programs, often the board will say, you know, having experience of doing this, get a top 10 of things that we know hurt the business. From that top 10, identify 3 that will bring the greatest ROI, and then let's pick one which be our start point. But doing that's a very, very hard and expensive exercise to do. So again, where do we begin? Which one will bring us the greatest ROI? Because we know we've only got finite resources. And then this critical last one here is, how do you measure its effect? How do you continue to understand if what you did actually brought the benefits that you said it would bring? Now, measuring is key to doing that, right? We know measuring is key to change, but why? Certainly why in the first instance? Well, actually, if you look at the programs that you'll do, you have to communicate up and you have to communicate down. So for example, once you've identified what potentials of change there are and what that return might look like, you have to be able to communicate that to, for example, the board level to get buy-in. In other words, convince them that this is the right thing to do and you need funding to be able to do that. But equally importantly is you have to be able to communicate down, because the only way you can affect change is you have to bring the people inside of your organization along with you to do that, because they're the ones that are going to be both implementing that change and a result of that change. Now, from experience that we've seen across Europe and the work that I've been involved in, it takes about 3 months to analyze a significant business process. And if you think about a business process, let's say you had something like customer onboarding, customer offboarding, or any finance process. And when you ask people, okay, how you do that, it could be flying maybe around offices, having 20 people in a room, doing personal interviews. And if you ask them, how much accuracy do you get? And they say, yeah, we get about 80%. Actually, it's not even close to that. On average, we're seeing the manual way of doing things is getting about 65% accuracy. So just bear that in mind. You spend 3 months of your time analyzing a process to get 65% accuracy. And if you imagine the fact that you then have to measure post-change to make sure you have the effect, that's potentially 6 months of effort on a change program, just in measuring whether or not the program can happen and then whether it was successful. So here's the pose, right? Actually, what if you could increase the accuracy of that knowledge to 90%? Actually take that value and, increase by potentially 50% of the knowledge. Yeah. In other words, you have a better start position. This concept of digital twin, and we'll talk about this a bit later, is the digital twin is where you then have the capability to take a process and model it in a digital way so you can play and tweak inside of that process. Now, the low-cost simulation concept is, what if you can ask questions like, let's say you wanted to take people out of the process, or you wanted to change the working conditions, or you wanted to automate something. And when I mean ask these questions, ask them on a digital twin in 25 to 30 seconds. And then when you're happy that you've identified something that's a potential to, let's say you've identified automation, being able to automatically one-click deploy and turn that analysis into execution through tools like robotic process automation or through human workflow automation. And finally, being able to measure the effect of that change in near real time, daily, weekly. So you actually have a compass on a program that lets you make sure that that project always stays true. And that's what the concept we're going to share here around process mining. So how does it work? And this is an example of how that project might work. You have your business apps on the left-hand side, and it's all about initially building this data pipeline. So process mining is a data-based approach to do analysis. We've all done data mining before, but actually turning that into a visual representation of a process is the key. And it starts with, let's say you have a process that might have 10 systems that support it. Pick the main one and get that data. And that log file data, I'll show you, by the way, it's 3 fields to start with, 3 fields: a process ID, a step name, and a date time. And then once you start getting that data in, you put that data into process mining to do the analysis. Let's have a look. And then maybe what you do is you think, okay, if I was to analyze this in more detail, then actually it'd be nice if we had some customer data. So what you would do is you would modify the data pipeline and you put it inside of process mining and analyze the process. And this is something that's happening, very dynamically, right? Because you're taking that data, modifying the ingestion and putting it in process mining and instantly seeing the results of doing that. That becomes your analysis phase. Now you're at that point, like I say, of being able to say, okay, this is where I need to focus, and we'll show that a little bit later. Phase 2 could actually, you looked at process mining and decided you want to change the organization. Maybe there are no process changes, but maybe it could be a way of moving people around that organization. The second part to that could be then deploying those changes into core automation or digital labor. So using RPA or using workflow systems. And again, analyzing the change, like we said, because that pipeline is still there, adjusting the pipeline. Maybe you want to get a bit more data in there to do further analysis, but you see the point. It becomes this looping around concept of do that initial analysis phase. And then every time you make a change into the core process, being able to loop back around and make sure you analyze that. In other words, keeping the process true. And then here is where you start moving into AI and ML. One of the things that I've seen so often is people will jump straight into doing AI or machine learning. And machine learning requires a lot of data, as we know, to train the models. And often getting that data is very hard. But actually, if you look at process mining, it becomes a very good way of encouraging data sharing or encouraging practical use of data. So as you build that data pipeline up, it becomes richer and richer and richer. The business becomes accustomed to sharing that data and seeing value, which means when you then decide to move into the whole machine learning world, you already have learned as an organization how to make the best out of that data. So it becomes a natural progression actually from process mining into the whole AI and ML space. benefits of process mining, we're going to see these actually in a little bit. This is just to give you a taste of some of the capabilities that process mining brings to the table. So again, and you can see this, there's a very, very deliberate grouping of capabilities here. But, you know, looking at things like know your customer and know your employee, that seems to be some huge use cases we're seeing right now around HR processing, onboarding, offboarding, especially when you're looking at people that have, you know, they're looking at maybe having temporary staff coming in. That's a very expensive process to do. Operational risk is also a very, very prevalent use case right now, especially when we're looking at compliance. And I'll show you shortly how you do that inside of process mining. But being able to have template processes that let you compare to say, am I doing the right process? And more importantly, what I'm not doing properly, how can I mitigate that? And then looking on the right-hand side there, moving into things like, you know, accelerating growth and operational efficiency, that's a core part of process mining, because as I've shown you in the slides before, you have immediate access to what your company's doing. And the final one there, it all comes down to the end point, which is how do we improve things for our customers at the beginning? And as it points there with some great examples of making sure that, you know, even if there are tickets coming in, making sure that those ticket processes are being responded to in the most efficient way possible to keep the customers happy. And just to give you an idea about some of the processes that process mining is looking at, look, the point here is to say it's everything. You know, you're looking at core business operations, things like procure to pay, order to cash, which seem to be sweet spot processes for process mining. But when you're looking down, these are some of the things we're seeing. You know, software build change is such a massive problem that actually being able to analyze that process is a core capability of making sure that changes become more efficient. And as I mentioned just a second ago, in the IT process space, help desk tickets, these are still processes, but they're not often seen as so. And being able to actually look at them as a process means that you can improve exactly what's going on behind there. And again, going further down there, if you look at things like security controls and server management, even they are effectively deployment processes. We have a lot of, you know, activity going on right now around one of IBM's other capabilities called Maximo, which is asset management. And again, being able to use process mining to improve asset management processes is also critical here. So I think it's probably a good time that we can drop in and take a look at the product, if that makes sense. Just while we're doing that, I think there's some questions just coming up. So I'm just going to come off of this presentation and I'm going to drop into process mining. So what we're looking at here is, and I picked this process deliberately because actually it's a very, very great way of explaining some of the concepts around process mining. And it's actually, it says bank account closure, but effectively it's customer offboarding. And as we all know, customers onboard and customers offboard. And there's a regulation in Europe that says that if you ask your bank to close your account, they have to do it within 12 days. Yeah. This particular bank, which is a bank in Italy, they knew they were failing to breach. They knew they were failing to do that. And of course, that has a ramification in terms of cost. The second thing is they knew they were doing about 60,000 customer offboarding exercises each year, and they knew they were expensive and they wanted to find out why. So this is the point around process mining. The key thing around process mining is to understand what are you trying to solve? Yeah. And they had a very, very good target in terms of what they were trying to solve. Now, what you're looking at is the process rendered. There's no modeling done in process mining. Effectively, and I'm just going to quickly show you this so you see what it looks like. The data source can come in either as a dropped CSV, or it can come in through an API, or it can come in from like a message bus, right? The data term. And it comes in like this. You can see the process ID, the activity, the start date, and you can have up to 80 extra fields of business data coming in. So you can see, for example, with this one, closure type, closure reason, letter received, etc. And what it does is it takes that data and it renders it in the lean model that you're seeing right now. Now, again, bearing in mind that normally if you do a process exercise and you do process analysis, it takes a long time to get to a process model. And we just done it by taking that data and clicking render. And here it is. Down the left-hand side, you can see there is a legend. The darker the colors, the more activities being done. The thicker the lines, the more flows there are between activities. So even if you didn't do anything here, you can see what the main flow through this process is by following those dark colors. Now, the first thing that's done automatically is this thing called variant analysis. Now, I know you can put post-it notes on a wall and draw lines between them, and that will show you the process, but try doing variant analysis manually. Look how many ways there are through this process. 266 ways, different ways of getting through this simple 13-step process. Now, the first question is, should I do something? And this gives you a great way to determine whether or not you should do something. You can see here, these top two case variants, 28% and 26%, nearly come to 55% of the work being done by this particular organization. You remember that 12-day deadline? They all exceed it by in excess of 7 and 8 days, respectively. So the first question of, should you do something, is answered immediately. Yes, you're breaching regulation. 55% of your work is breaching regulation. And more importantly, why is there 266 ways through this process? That sounds a bit crazy to me. The next thing that's automatically done in here is a thing called compliance analysis. And if we look at this on the right-hand side, you can see that it actually checks the conformance now between a model process, which could come from, for example, IBM's BlueWorks Live, or it could come from other BPMN capabilities. And what it now does is it will compare that model process with the process that's been derived from the data. Are you doing something you shouldn't be doing? Is essentially the question that's being asked here. And you can see on the right-hand side, if we scroll down, you can see how conformant are you as an organization. And if we move down, we can see what are those things and the impact of that non-conformance. So we can now see a new legend, right? We have red and we have yellow. The red boxes are tasks that you should not do, and yet you are doing. You can see them also reflected on the right-hand side here. Back office adjustment requested, pending request for acquittance of errors. What is the impact of that? 28 days, it's actually adding, it's significantly modifying the process. The next one would then be yellow tasks, and they are tasks that you should do, but you are not doing. Now, in this process, there aren't any, right? So that's effectively saying, this is your model, and it's in breach. And we're seeing a lot of customers using this right now for compliance. In other words, making sure we have a great use case, for example, with an organization that was sampling maybe 5 to 6%. That's all it could do with 200, 250 compliance staff, sample about 4 to 5% of the cases. With process mining, they can now sample 100% of the cases. And process mining identifies those cases that are out of conformance, and just the processes out of conformance go to the compliance team. So now they can look at 100% of their business by using process mining to support that. So let's have a look now at the other capabilities that you can do. You remember I mentioned, by the way, that there are 266 ways through this process. One of the things you can do is you can actually turn that up and down. So if I show you what those 266 ways through the process look like, you can just see actually how messy this process is. Effectively, everything is linked everywhere. But this is difficult to analyze and see, and that's why there's the capability very quickly being able to zoom up, zoom in, and step back and start reducing the numbers of, say, relationships, or reducing the numbers of activities. So you now can see the wood through the trees. So let's look at this in a different performance model. We can see here where the work is happening. However, how is the work performing? And one of those options is to look at this in duration form. So now you can see we have a duration element to the process. We have a new legend. The legend is the darker the color, the longer it takes. The thicker the line, the longer the delay is between these two activities. If we zoom in and take a look, what we can see here, BO service closure, we'd already highlighted that this was a problem in terms of flow, because it came up actually as a conformance analysis with rework. But we can also see now that actually it's clearly something that's taking too long. And if we look at the metrics that's covered around this box, we can see this one, for example, this box up here. This is the, for those familiar with workflow systems, this is the average queue depth and the maximum queue depth. This underneath here is the unique numbers of resources on average that are used to execute the work out of a possible 20. If we look at this number up here, this is the average wait time. So in other words, any inbounds in here, this is the average length of time they wait, 7 hours 51. And the maximum, you can see 121 days. So some cases are actually taking 121 days when they should take 12. And then you can see on the lines, there's some dates. And these are the average wait times for the line connections that you can see. So average for this one from here to here is 1 hour. Average for all is 7 hours, etc. And the final one is this one. And that's the average wait time, execution time for this task. So it takes about 2 days for this task to be processed. Now, okay, it's taking a long time, but should it? And one of the things that you can do within process mining is you can actually put a KPI measure around this. So you can define KPIs like how long should this process take? How long should this activity take? How long should the wait time be? And you can overlay that KPI palette and see it in red, amber, green, very, very easy on the process. So now, not just are we looking at the fact that this takes a long time, but actually it is also shouldn't take a long time. It's breaching KPI. So clearly this is a focus area for process mining here. We can see this one's heading into amber, but this is clearly a red. So again, you remember we mentioned about where do we focus our efforts because we all have finite resources. You can see with very few clicks inside of process mining, it's already starting to steer us towards where should we focus our effort on this process if we're going to make it more efficient, because it's taking us down that route. Now, I'm just going to go off on a slight deviation initially, and that's just to show you some capabilities. So if I click the BPMN tab, we can automatically create a very nice swim lane activity model in BPMN format. Again, how long does this normally take you if you sit with a business and interview people? We can do this using data, automatically create that model. We can then export that model into, for example, if you're using BlueWorks Live, Aris, Casewise, any other BPMN compatible capability. But here's the improvement here is every time this data is ingested, this model is up to date, and then that can be pushed into your repository. So in effect, you have near real-time model updates from the executing process in your business. And we know that lots of organizations have teams dedicated around just doing process modeling to make sure they know what's happening. Remember I said we can have up to 80 fields that come in with this process. Process mining can do a thing called discovery, rules discovery. It takes about 55 seconds, but effectively what it's doing is it's looking at the data that you passed in through that data model, and it's identifying how that data changes through the conditions. And it will build a rule. It'll go, this is what I've discovered. I think this is the rule. That's not just saying the fact that something goes from step A to step B, but why does it do that? This is critical, right? We've found some amazing in processes where customers have looked at this and it will identify the actual data. So actually we've identified where maybe the prime client has not been getting the right service, and it's identified that with these rules. Can you now see they're popped onto the map? But what we'll do is we'll just have a look at them from an overview perspective. So here's all the rules that process mining has identified. So if we were to look at, for example, why request created is going to network service closure, if that was, for example, a breaching task, we shouldn't be doing it. Now we can find out why. And if I click over here and have a look at the gateway information, here are the rules that it's found. So we can see if the closure type reason is this and the closure type is this, then it flows this way. And what it's also doing is it's actually also telling us how accurate these rules are. These numbers should be over 70%. So this rule covers about 28% of cases, but for the cases it covers, it's 97% accurate. So it's roughly there, but clearly we don't know what's really being decided. Again, I ask you, how many times have you asked someone, why do they do that? And they'll go, I don't know, I always have. This is giving you that capability of saying we don't know something, get more data, and we can make a better informed decision about what that rule does. These rules can then be exported in decision management notation and then used in other decisioning tools. So it's also an accelerated way of being able to get there. Now let's look at something. If we're looking at the process and you want to start drilling in, you can then do this with filters. So for example, maybe you're looking at the process and you want to only see those cases going this way. If you click this, you see the menu appears, and we can include cases with just this activity. If I click it, it filters the use cases. And if you notice, we've got 3 filters. Now we have 4. And if we look on the left-hand side of the model, as it applies that filter, we can see what our current filters are. So here's all of our filters that we have included here. We're looking 39% of the model. We're looking about 45% of the events now with that active filter. Well, you can go further. So you can actually click on add filter, and let's say you wanted to filter just a particular use case, or if you wanted to filter just a particular kind of activity, or even say, actually, let's look at a process flow. So you're only interested in those cases that always flow from here to here, and click add. And when you can now see it's created that, click add filter, and again, it builds that filter up. And again, you can see the kind of filters you can add, outliers, custom metrics, KPIs, all these capabilities are added. But what you do is, this is how you ask questions of the process, by filtering down and drilling down to start identifying a challenge. And then when you're happy, you can then save those filters as filter templates, right? You can see there's some saved here. So at any point in time, you can go back and say, okay, I want to look at this. Now, once you have those, and I'm just going to delete these two that I added, you can then use that for comparing your business. In other words, those filters could be a date range, or those filters could be two different offices. And once you have those filter templates, you can do the comparison. So you now see this compare tool. If we click compare, you can pick those two filter types that you have, Institute 1 and Institute 6. So that's head office, and that is a subordinate office, and click compare processes. And what it will now do is it will compare performance against those two filter sets. So in this case, what we want to do is see how a child office is comparing to head office. We can see there's about 150,000 cases being done in head office. Only 1% of that is being done inside of a subordinate. But look at the performance difference. This office clearly does this 10 days quicker. It's a bit cheaper, but we can think, okay, is there any impact between workload and duration? I would say it's actually opposing here. So the more work there has, the quicker they're done. We can have a look at actually how they're performing individually against KPI. So we can both see them, they're in KPI failure in service closure. And if we scroll down, we can see, okay, why might that be the case? Why would there be such a disparity? And you can compare the process directly. Actually, it's because there's activities done by head office that aren't being done by the subordinate office. So it lets you do direct process comparisons as well as performance of those metrics. And like I say, that could be date, or that could be KPIs, or it could be teams, anything you wish to compare. I'm just going to go back to the process, and I'm going to show you something which is, I'm not going to cover task mining today because there's a lot being shown already, but I'm going to show you the concept of how process mining and task mining is related. So you can see BO service closure just here. Now what you can do is you can look at this task and you can identify who's doing the work. So very, very quickly, we can look at this, click on, for example, resource, and it shows you who's doing this activity, and more importantly, how much of the work they're doing. So we can see there's a number of users. And you can put a recorder on the desktop of these people and say, I'd like to record what you do for a day or two or a week. Now you can choose, you can whitelist and blacklist applications, and you can say you only want to record the parts of the process that are related to this process. And what it does is it then enables you to drill down into that process. So now if you look, we have over here, launch task mining. If I select that, it takes me down now into the task mine level of this process. So you can see now I can do all of the process mining I showed you before, but on the actual low-level process, what's happening daily here. And again, if you look on the right-hand side in case variance, we can actually see 50% of the cases are done in one case variance. So actually, it seems to be quite conformant. There's a couple of outliers, but generally 50% of the work is done here. But just introducing the concept of dashboards now, some of the out-of-the-box dashboards that come with process mining are, for example, this one, which is performance and productivity analysis. Now you remember BO service closure took 2 days at the top level. In the drill down, it actually takes 1 hour of work, 4 hours spent doing nothing, and 7 hours 55 spent doing other activities not related to this. Now that's where you get the business case for RPA, and we've seen many RPA instances applied, and the business case is wrong. So here you can see we can get a very, very accurate metric, and it's a big difference between what the high level process says and what happens at that low level. Yeah, just one example. Now what I'm going to, sorry, there's a box in my way. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to the process and I'm going to go back to the parent. My apologies, but I think before this I turned off my Google pop-up, and I think it's overrated. So here we are back at that process. Now, you've seen BO service closure and you've seen that we've drilled down. What we can now do is we can ask process mining for all of those tasks that we've done task mining for, is there a potential of doing automation inside of that process? And what it's doing is it's comparing all that task mine data and it's identifying based on a number of factors. So we want to, let's say we want to automate 50% of this, and we want to automate just one case variant. Yeah, we want to keep the robot simple. And if we look down, we can see it's, yes, it's found that. Actually, it's done the variant analysis, and it's found that we could get 50% if we automated this process, this task. If we turn that up to say, well, what about if we automated 2 case variants? Well, now we can attain 70% automation here and 50% automation there. So now it's steering us to where we want to be. However, now let's do something which is, I think, game-changing in that simulation. Let's ask the model actually what would happen. So we can scroll down now and say, okay, let's create a simulation based on this idea before we do something. You remember in the presentation, the concept of digital twin, you know, and how do we ask that digital twin? And this is how we do that. So we can see it's already given us a high level estimate of how much time it thinks we can save. But here you can tweak everything you want to tweak. If we scroll down to BO service closure, you can see here's that task we want to automate, but we can ask other questions. What if we took 2 people out of the process? What if we changed the calendar and said people are only working 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week? Or what, like we said, what if we want to automate this activity and make the robot look like a human? We could even edit the process, for example, and add an activity. So let's say, actually, we're gonna change this task, but let's maybe put a little task in that lets us measure that the performance. So we'll take an activity, we'll give it to that person to do, and we're going to call it check automation. Okay, so we want to modify the process in effect. And now what we're going to do is we'll link that one here, and we will link this one here. So now we've added something in flight. And let's go back to our scenario, click yes. And now if we scroll down, we can see that we have BO service closure, and now we have this new automation task, check automation. One person can do it, that's fine. We're going to make it, say, take 5 minutes, and we'll make it take 1 minute when you actually open up the item. Okay, I'm happy, right? We've tweaked everything. If you wanted to also, you can scroll down and you can change where the work flows inside of the gateways. But you can see here, you can play with this model as much as you want, even actually creating a new process and doing simulation on a process from scratch. But we're going to run a simulation. Click run and click yes. Remember what I've done? We've automated an activity, we've taken 2 people out of the process, and we've added a new activity to check that automation. And it's now going to run that use case. And it's going to use that tool I showed you before, that compare tool, to compare what the performance difference is now between that, right? So we have the as is and the to be. And let's see if it made a difference. So what I've done is we've looked at process mining to identify a challenge. We have identified there's a task that's causing us a problem. We've now asked process mining to go further and task mine that activity to get further detail. And now we're asking process mining to say, look, if we did automate that, what impact would it have on the process? And here we can see that actually it'll take 4 days off of the process. It's increased the cost, and that's probably got something to do with adding that extra activity, but it's reduced the process by 4 days. So we're getting more towards the 12 days that we need to attain. And if we scroll down, we can actually see in here against performance, okay, what performance has it improved? Here we go. BO service closure, if we automated that activity, would bring it back into KPI green. So it affects the KPIs and it improves that process performance. And again, you've seen it before, but we could even compare the before and after models and actually see exactly how that data is flowing through. But you can see effectively what we've been able to do is simulate what that action might be. Now, if need be, we could go back to the scenario and modify and come back and go back and keep asking questions. And like I said, I'm not going to show you RPA here either, but you can see road mapping here is I can then create an RPA bot and it will generate a bot. I don't have it installed, but it will generate a bot template in RPA ready to execute. So again, you remember going back to that whole following up with that all activity is if we were to generate that bot would act against the business systems. The data is coming in every day into process mining. You can then start using, once you're doing that change, you can then start using analytics dashboards inside of automation to start then measuring this. So as that data is coming in, you're looking at it in process mining, you're identifying opportunity, you're applying that opportunity with RPA or with human workflow or another system, and then you're using process mining to continually measure to make sure that, hey, we want more automation and we want less manual. So you can start to then have executive dashboarding that lets people measure how the change project is being affected. So I'm going to end the demo there because, again, that was to give you just an overview around process mining. I'm just going to drop into, I think, in here, and I'm going to pass back to Jakaj.
Yes. Thank you, Lee. Powerful tool for a kind of X-ray for our processes, as long as we have data, of course. That we discovered as a Rhenus automation process mining more than 20 years ago, just as a gateway for more automation, because we specialized before almost for only for robotic process automation, how to find the proper processes, the candidates, and the sub-processes steps to automate and make everything virtually on the screen in form of digital twin. So what are the recommendation for us? Let me just share the screen with you. Is to, can you see the slide? Yeah, to identify the pain, because it's difficult to say where to start. We can't optimize every processes at once. The best solution is to make some kind of workshop to assess where are the pains, what is directly influencing our customers, and where the impact of entire company is the biggest one. The second, the question is, do we have some data? Some, of course, but do we have enough data? Do we know where to find the data, in which application systems or data sources? It's really crucial. We don't have to find any data in the beginning, but we have to know as more data, then better the picture of this X-ray will be. Of course, you can count on Rhenus Automation. As I said before, we are partnering with IBM since a year, and especially specializing on Cloud Pak for Business Automation, and process mining is a part of this Cloud Pak for Business Automation. And what I would like just to convince you today, just think about making some proof of value exercise in your company. The bar how to start is very low now compared with previous year. You can just try on your own and start with some small processes for a short period of time, but it's worth to consider with your team. We have some experiences, of course. As I said before, we are problem solvers, and not only consulting companies, but really do automate the businesses. And Rhenus Automation operates in 6 European countries, and we are very proud of a growing portfolio of customers. And what I would like just to say is that our services are not only limited to process mining or to robotics. We have projects based on blockchain solution like digital product passport. We try to implement much more. We try to visualize, to put more data in supply chains to achieve control tower level, that all processes needed are visible, and thus the entire supply chain is manageable. Of course, robotic process automation and intelligent OCR is just like a package, different services needed to automate the businesses, not to make any people obsolete, to help people to make possible that to make able for people to achieve more through different kind of automation. Yeah, the main goal is, of course, to achieve some level of let's say saturation of with technology in our companies, that we can say we automated everything, if not possible, if not needed, if not allowed to automate, we eliminate, and thus we can just improve our performance, our business competitiveness. And this is exactly where Rhenus Automation is focusing, not only within Rhenus Group, but we work extensively with third parties. And now maybe something which is important to you, I would like just to invite you to schedule a 60-minute free workshop with us as a partner of IBM. And during the workshop, our expert will help you just and your team members, of course, understand the concept of process mining. We will in we will just repeat a lot of information given during today's webinar to your people, to your colleagues in the company. And we will just, I think the agenda of the workshop is well structured, because we have not only explaining what is behind process mining as a tool, but we have the inclusion of use cases from different industries to make the discussion more engaging and relatable for your people. We have the deep dive and high-level assessment of processes you can just deliver. Before our workshop, you can brainstorm what could be suitable in your cases. We have the Q&A session just to give you opportunity to clarify any doubts combined with that tool. Please note that we have 10 slots available for on a first come, first served basis. Don't hesitate to schedule your workshop as soon as possible. The link you have here below, but we will send the presentation to all of you, of course. Now we reached just the Q&A portion of our presentation, and please feel free to submit any questions you may have using the chat box or Q&A feature. And together with Lee, especially Lee, we will do our best to answer as many questions as possible within the next time. And 10 minutes are left, or 11, so keep them coming. To warm up, maybe Lee, the question is very often from our customers. They understood digital twin was mostly used for physical processes running in some warehouses where we made these graphs. And now you mentioned for these virtual processes performed on a computer, we do digital twin too. Is it not confusing, or is it the same?
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, ultimately with process mining, it just looks at the event source data. So, you know, you are, like you say, you're creating a digital model of a virtual process or a real process. Process mining doesn't differentiate. I was also sort of, watching the questions while we started here, and just seeing some of the questions. Clearly, data is still the focus, and data has always been the focus. One of the great questions is around, what happens if you don't have a record of data in a system? Well, this is where task mining is useful, because task mining, like sort of show, will record and create that event log. Another one that came up was around how large the data set should be, and that in itself is subjective. But the more data you have, the more analysis you can do. The difference between task mining and process mining is process mining looks at now and goes backward. And often what people will look at is they want to look at a year's worth of work. And then that way you can do comparisons over a quarter, or you can do comparisons over the year. So it's really important that you like you said in your slide, you have to understand what you're trying to achieve, because that will determine how much data you need. And then if you also look at that, people are talking about sources of data, everything is. And you remember in that slide I mentioned that had how we build the data pipeline and then do the deployment, that pipeline changes. So maybe it starts, it could start with SAP, but then maybe you blend in data from Maximo, and then maybe you blend in data from CRM. There's a great use case where we were working with an organization in Germany, and they had a process, and only 3% got to the end. 3% of cases got to the end. So that was 97% were going somewhere else. So we looked at it and we thought, okay, where are they going? And 50% were leaving at step 4. So we looked at the process and thought, right, it would be nice if we had some product information. So we added product information into the pipeline. That then meant that we could identify, okay, it's clearly this kind of product that's ending at step 4 because of this particular activity. Well, let's now look at our customers. So we put customer information in the stream. And we could see it was a particular kind of customer in a particular part of Germany that ordered that particular kind of product, was responsible for 50% of those not getting to the end. So, of course, what that meant was it wasn't a process change. It was a change to the product offering to make sure it was offered to the right person. And that's a great example, I think, of being able to start with small data, see a problem, and then slowly add bits of data to make sure you get more analysis.
Yes. Yeah, very crucial sentence. Not to see polishing of processes as an ultimate goal. Through the optimizing of processes, we influence our products, how we can monetize our value on the market. Lee, we have first question from Jacek. How large the data set should be to allow for meaningful insights?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, it's dependent upon what you're trying to achieve, right? So I've been answering some of these questions actually in the chat while we've been going through. It could be 3 months, it could be 1 year, it could be 1 month. If you've identified a problem that's 1 month old, then 1 month's worth of data would be enough. But if you want to see how your business performed over a year, then a year's worth of view is powerful.
Can we say real time data are data coming just from last week?
Yeah, and you know, I don't like the word real time, but I would use business real time or near real time. So you could ingest data into process mining daily if you wanted, hourly if you wanted, or weekly. And it depends on, again, you remember I mentioned maybe you bring data in for the last year, but then you keep bringing data in every week to see if your process is improving the way you want it to. So absolutely.
Yes. Thomas is asking, and which systems are providing this data? What are the requirements for those systems? Is it from systems like CRP, ERP, or other dedicated tools to measure process and advancement?
All of them. You know, I mean, if you look at that use case I mentioned, that had ERP, CRM, and product. So again, if you look at a process, you would pick maybe the main one and start with there. We do a lot of work with SAP. You know, SAP is a complex tool. So like to analyze processes there.
Yes, Stefan is asking, can you leverage the benefits of process mining if not all processes are digitized?
Yep, and that again goes back to task mining. Yeah, so if you don't have a process in a repository, then we can use task mining on a desktop to see what's going on, and that will create you the event log from that recorder.
Zalisha is asking, so valuable information. I'm actually reviewing a process for radiology services at my organization for the past 3 months. Maybe this is much more information than question, but could you imagine to deploy process mining for company organization specialized on radiology services?
Oddly enough, we are actually working with health companies on what's called patient journeys. So, and you know, and a radiology service is exactly a patient journey. Yeah? So it's being able to track how that patient comes in, how they move through the organization, and how they get results and how they move back out. So absolutely, that is a great use case for process mining.
Another question from Tobias is, what are the technical requirements for a company to make use of this tool?
Yeah, and that is a good question, and that's where this workshop that you offered will start to highlight that, right? So, you know, process mining is available in 4 main availability. So, on-premise, off-premise, cloud, and SaaS. And again, that will depend on all the organizations and how those organizations want to do it. So, what it really comes down to is, what data do we need, and how do we get that data? That's the technical requirement. And that's where the workshops come in handy, because we can identify as part of that piece of work.
Okay, I don't see any other question. Maybe let me just show you the final slide. Okay, so I can say on this stage, Lee, thank you very much. I enjoy every time presentation with you and your attendance, and I'm really feel secure having you on our side, and look bold for the next months, because there is more and more interest between even our existing customer, how to get more information about their process, how to know where to start. And my appeal to all attendees is, don't hesitate to contact us directly in English, German, Italian, because Lee is speaking Italian too, in the next few days. Why only few? Because sometimes later becomes never. I made with Lee an initial step, but decision is yours. Thank you again. Have a great day for all participants, and may the process mining force be with you.